Hello and welcome to Genealogy Quick Start. I am Shamel Jordan, your host, and today we are going rural, okay? We have quick starts that are going to help people who are possibly have ancestors in rural situations. But first, I want to make sure that you know to stay on top of what's going on with Genealogy Quick Start, please subscribe to our newsletter. We send about two, maybe three per month. So definitely subscribe. And you know that we are available on Philly Cam. This is a Philly Cam show. Also on YouTube and Facebook. We are so grateful to wherever you're watching us. We are just really always excited to have you here. So if you are here, you know what to do. Put your name, put your where you're viewing from, as well as your genealogy group, so that we can do a shout out to you and appreciate you properly. Today, we have two new quick starts. One is actually a first. We are doing outbuildings and outhouses mapping the farm. You know, I love mapping. Mapping is like key to genealogy. And then the first is we have an extra special guest here today, Erwin Polk of the Delaware Augs chapter, and he is going to do our very first Buffalo Soldier quick start. And so we are very excited to have Erwin here to do that for us today. So without further ado, let me bring out the super quick starters. First up, columnist and editor James M. BEIDLER. How are you? And genealogy tip of the day, Michael John NEILL. How you doing, guys? Thank you for being here.
Good to
So
be here.
we have a military quick start coming up. Do you guys have any? I know you have every type of ancestor there are. You might not have a Buffalo Soldier, but I know you might. I'm not going to count you out, but I know you have military ancestors. Do you have any military ancestor that's particularly interesting?
I have a Civil War soldier who was fairly old. He was in his 40s. And because he was in the Pennsylvania Volunteers, and there's an excellent volume that takes you day by day through history of the Pennsylvania Volunteers, so you can really put yourself in his shoes in the last year of the war.
That's pretty cool. I would
I
love to be
have
able to do that. Michael, I know you have a cool
I have a
ancestor.
Civil War. He's actually my step third great grandfather who enlisted in the Civil War when he was, I think, 51 or 52. And he was discharged at the age of 53. Reason was old age, which I thought was interesting given the age when he enlisted. But he did get a pension and all that good stuff. But he was discharged due to old age, and he had some medical issues that they said weren't related to his service. Surprise, surprise. But it was. I thought the discharge was very interesting, given they knew his age. When he was clear about his age when he enlisted, it wasn't like he lied and said he was 30. The enlistment age is very clear, but things are what they are.
They are what they are. I do not, I would say, I'm not going to say I don't have any Civil War ancestors, but I researched them. And one of the most interesting ones that made me think is a man from Delaware. And he was drafted. He was African American. He was drafted into the Civil War. He even told the pensioner that, the person that he was bound to, so he was an indentured servant, read the letter to him that he was to join up. And he ran away to Philly, to Pennsylvania, so that he could join up on his own esteem. And he changed his name. So that was part of the reason why this showed up in his pension packet.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, he didn't mind joining the fight, but he wanted to do it on his own esteem, which I thought was pretty interesting. So who do we have here today? Hello, who was our first? So first who came in, I don't even know how they got in so early, is Heal My Roots. Looking forward to Erwin. He's always a good time. So Erwin hasn't even started and his fans have come in. Hello, hello, Staten from Delaware Oggs. Here's Erwin's people. And then Paula Moen from West Defford. Paula, I talked to Jenny today, just so that you know. Brenda Harris. Hello, Brenda. Thanks for joining us. And we have, is this Baltimore Oggs? Hey, Victoria. Hello, June from Ohio. Dr. Debbie's group, AAGS in Cleveland. And there's Judy from Chicagoland. Thanks for joining us, Judy. And Jean, here we go with our regulars. It's so nice to have you here from Collegeville. Oh, here we go. She's going to show what a genealogy junkie she is. She's from Collegeville, and she is part of AAGG as well as the Oggs in Philly, two groups in the same city. Junkie. And she is VGS, very good. Also, oh my goodness, Moniette from Denver. Moniette, I am so proud of you chatting. Look at you. Hello, Patricia from Delaware Oggs. Rosalind Green, who I hope you will join us one day. Hey, Dean Henry from Oggs. AAGG. What about GSP? Dean, what's going on here? I'm not going to call you out. Hello, M. Dan Lee from PG County, all and Maryland Oggs. And we have PNBC Women, Cheryl Morrell from the Baltimore Oggs. Let me tell you about Baltimore. Baltimore came to Cherry Hill. We had a big event where we had Martin Luther King's son. They took a bus and they came to Cherry Hill, New Jersey to celebrate genealogy with us. I will never, ever forget that. Hi, Stacy Roberts from the Delaware Oggs, another officer of Oggs, along with Rosalind Green. All right. Thank you so much for telling us who you are. We are so happy to have you here. Now it's time for our very first quick start. You guys ready?
Yeah. We'll find out.
All right, let's see what is this quick start. We are talking about outbuildings and outhouses. I had to explain to the third graders what an outhouse is. And this is all about mapping the farm. And Jim and Michael, they never cease to amaze me how incredible they are. So you guys ready? So talk to us about this mapping the farm. I think it's pretty fairly self-explanatory, but you guys can maybe add a little color.
I think it is one of the, well, we're not going to get too colorful with the outhouses and the outbuildings, but we're going to talk about some farm examples, but you could do this with urban ancestors as well, mapping out even the inside of the house. You could map out locations they went, where the school was at, the church was at, other things, nicknames for places maybe, and things like that as well. So while we're going to talk about rural things, because that's our background and our examples, you could extrapolate this to a variety of other situations. So don't limit yourself. And if you don't have any rural people, while we're yapping about ours and showing some examples, think about how you could tweak or modify it for your urban or metropolitan ancestors as well.
Yeah, that's really great to point out. Yeah, I'm the product of Pennsylvania German farmer stacked upon Pennsylvania German farmer stacked upon Pennsylvania German farmer. You know, my dad only changed the paradigm by becoming a steel worker because he didn't like getting up at 4 a.m. to milk the cows on his dad's dairy farm. So, but yeah, as we'll see, you know, I live on a small farmette that has been in my family just over 100 years, and you know, Michael is the product of good Midwestern farming stock too. So that's what we primarily went with. But I do, like I said, I do like his example. If you have urban folks to plot out a neighborhood, and you know what are those closest things like their church that they went to. If you're having trouble finding records, you might want to plot what the 3 closest churches are or whatever, because that may have an impact.
You know, and one last thing before we get started, drawing these maps out, whether it's urban or rural or whatever, can be a real good tool if you're interviewing or having a family history conversation with somebody and they're maybe stuck or they can't remember anything or whatever. Help them draw out a map of the locations and places that, even if you can find them on Google, just help that person draw out a map of those locations, because that might get the memories churning in their head when they think about the relative position of places.
Very true.
Yep.
Very true. Always bring documents and stuff when you're doing oral histories. And I love plotting neighborhoods because things are changing so quickly. My cousins moved down to Georgia and they come back every year and they're like, oh my God, where'd that come from? All right, let's get going with outbuildings. First of all, what is an outbuilding? Like, is that a Midwest term? Do we use that, Jim, up here?
Oh, I think we might. I've also heard them called dependencies. In other words, they are
like, what's an outbuilding?
I always thought dependencies were children or people you were responsible for.
Those
must be another show.
Those are dependents. Dependencies are things like the chicken house and the servants' quarters and things like that.
Sometimes they're also referred to as appurtenances, I believe. If I may be slightly butchering that word. I'm not going to spell it APPURTENANCE. But outbuildings are just a smaller building. There's the house you live in. There may be a big barn, and outbuildings are maybe the barn and some of the smaller buildings that are used for storage and chicken coops and things of that.
And showing they are not connected to the main house. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get going with step 1, which is to choose a rural family, of course. So Jim, you chose your specific household now. Michael, you chose a family. Which family did you choose?
I choose the farm my grandparents lived on, which my parents lived on later, and my brother lives on now. And there's been the one thing we're going to talk about is to think about the changes that have taken place over time in the buildings, and we'll see an example of that in a picture we have.
Okay.
So things do change over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's because this was fairly soon after I started genealogy in the 80s. I interviewed some of the older family members and said, what did this all look like? We had some pictures of the outside, but it was not documenting things in that way. And then they were able to fill in a lot of the details. I was really surprised when it was a working small farm, how many of these buildings there are. And you'll see a map of that a little bit later. So it's also just as an FYI, this 6 acres that I'm on now was originally part of 451 acres. That was the original plot that a man named Matthias Weber bought from the Penn family in the 1750s, and he through various machinations, it ended up in the hands of his only heir, his granddaughter, and stayed fairly intact from the 1750s until the 1870s, when third generation below the granddaughter started breaking it up into what would be called development plots of the day, 6 acres, 11 acres, whatever. And it's interesting. So one of the boundaries of my property was on the edge of that original 451 acres. So there's a property boundary as part of my boundary that dates back to 1751.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now I get why you call it a farmlet. I was going to say, what the heck is a farmlet? I get it now.
It's a mini farm.
Yeah.
The boundaries of mine are not nearly that old. They date from the 1930s, the one we're going to look at. So.
All right. So we chosen a rural family, but Michael's caveat, you can do this in an urban area as well. And so we have a family. Step 2 is to look for photos, sketches, or photos. Did I do that? Sorry.
Well, we thought photos were really important, so it wasn't right. That's, the intent there was aerial photos. I'm pretty sure that
So
we
where
got
do
an
you
example of one
find
of
these
those.
cool photos?
The aerial photos, we'll talk. There's a website called Vintage Maps. That's the vintage photo. I forget the name of the site, but it's got aerial maps, photos that were taken in the 1950s and 60s. And these were done. They were sold to the landowner. The landowner could buy a copy of the picture for quite a pricey amount. You could get it framed and whatever. And they were published in book form, and you could buy the book if you didn't want to buy the print of your farm. Then there's a company in Ohio whose name I clearly have now forgotten. Somebody may mention it in the chat, that has digitized these photos of these farms taken from the air, if you will, in the 50s and 60s. And it's there in the quick. Is that the right one?
That's the one that I've been using lately, but we'll find yours.
I think there's a different one. I want to say it's got a different. It's in the footer of the illustration, I believe.
Okay.
That can be a place to get those pictures and to see what it looked like at that point in time. You might have, your family may have pictures. If they were really well off, they might have had a sketch published in a county history or a county plat book or a county atlas. I have none of those in my background. I'm assuming Jim has a lot of those, but I have none of those because my people just didn't bother to go to that expense. But that's a place to get some of those items as well.
My parents actually did buy one in 1978, so that was kind of another round of those aerial people who went around. Yeah.
No, that's really cool. So are there, does the can you get them from I thought there was like a National Archives site or something like that, or no, that had these aerials?
There may be some. Those are from the topographical maps and are not as detailed and as refined as the ones that we're going to see in the illustration. They're from a much higher vantage point, and you can see buildings and things, but not with the level of detail that we're going to see in the illustration.
So I think that's the same with the historical aerials. Yours are far better, but these have actually helped me to find a place that hasn't existed in 100 years. So it's been great. Yeah. So we are using photographs and sketches and aerial photographs. Let's move on to step 3. And we're going to show you all these examples in a second. You want to interview relatives. So Jim, you talked about how you interviewed your relatives about this.
Yeah, when I started genealogy in the 80s, of course, my mother was still alive, and she was born in 1927, so she had some memory of when it was still a working farm. But there were two. There was a first cousin of her mother who was born 1899 and spent summers at the property. So she was my primary source, because her memory was still good at that time, and she could tell me, this is where the chicken house was. This is where the stump was where we beheaded the chickens. She had all the darn details of everything about the place. Yeah.
Do you have on your map like the chicken head like hanging off the stump? No, I'm just kidding.
I do not.
So I just did an oral interview today, and my cousin talked about the chicken coop, and she talked about how she got tired of, she had to always get the pine needles to go in the bottom of the chicken coop. Like, I still need to understand more about that. But yeah, chicken coops were like a real thing back then. All right, so we're interviewing relatives, and then we want to draw a sketch. Can I show your stuff now?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, because your sketches have inspired me. Like I'm gonna have so many sketches, it's not even gonna be funny. So talk to us, Jim.
Yeah, well, this is from Google Maps. That'll is a lot more proportional, obviously, and my property is both that front field and then the kind of L-shaped back field, and then my house and barn in between there. And yeah, it totals about 6 acres. And if we go to the next one, you'll see. No, that's not the one I was expecting. We'll get. There's
There we
mine.
go. There we go.
Oh, and yeah, so this is, doesn't quite match up with Google, but it shows that front field at one time was divided into field and orchard and had fencing in between, and that kind of what's now kind of an L-shaped backfield was divided up into was fenced into three. And I don't know if one of those was pasturing for animals. I'm not sure what, because those fences were all long gone. And still on the property today, of course, you have my house, you have my barn with a horse stable attached to it. And then things and the outhouse. I still do use as many folks do now. My outhouse is a tool shed. So those all remain. But things like the chicken house and shop are gone. A mini garage that was by the road is gone. Cold cellar is still there. Not used, but it's still there. And another thing that was taken down was a summer house, and this was where you would cook during the summer because of the chance of fire from cooking. You don't want to lose your main house. You might lose this summer house, and that I do still remember from my youth. And my dad took that down. I was always warned against going in there because the floor to the second floor had broken down. You could have easily fallen through. But yeah, so
I love this, Jim. Like I just love it. You need to do a diorama.
Okay, get some little animals and everything.
Yes. Why is this backwards? There's something crazy going on. Okay.
This is a slightly different one. This one's not of the outbuildings. This one, these are four different sections in two adjacent townships, if you're familiar with that terminology. And I just took Microsoft Paint and I roughly sketched out, you could do this on pencil and paper, but I roughly sketched out a few things using rectangles, trapezoids, whatever shapes, to put the names of different pieces of property, describe what they were. The old railroad tracks that have been abandoned for over 100 years. There's a shed we call Jurgen's Shed. I don't even know why we call it that, because I can't find a family with that last name that lived there or owned the property. So it could be there was a tenant with that last name. Mark the spot where my brother and I grew up. There's a 40-acre parcel my mother bought, though that's what we call it. Mom's 40. The orange piece of ground, which I thought I had that label, but I'm not seeing it now. We call that the Henderson place, because that was the last name butchered of the family that my father bought that from when we were really small. So if there's names you have for places that are unofficial names, you might want to, as I've done here with a few of these things, indicate those as well, or things that are no longer in existence. Well, it's really kind of neat when you look at a plat book of those with the old railroad tracks. They've been gone for 100 years, but you can see on a plat book where they used to be because of the property lines, because that split properties, and they were sold based on what side of the railroad tracks they were on. But this could be one way you could, we're going to talk. There's, I think, an example where I've drawn out. There we go. And this is not quite as good. I don't think it's as nice as Jim's picture. And this is not to scale. When I got done with this, I noticed this was just totally, the proportions are totally off. But the
I
key is
love it though.
you want to start with something. And
Yes.
I think an example like this, or Jim's example, is something you can take to a relative after you've got it done, which is one of our steps, if I remember, and say, what's wrong with this? Do I have these? Because my scale is bad on this, but I've got the chicken coop, the outhouse, there's a well, there's a garage, the house, a couple barns, a feedlot, what I've called the add-on shed, and a few other, a junk shed, and things like that. And then I put where the highway was at to give it some perspective. Some of these buildings are still there. The original house, the garage, a few other things are gone. They've been replaced with a new house and a much larger shed there. But you might want to put an approximate, I didn't do this, put an approximate date or time span when the map was accurate. This would be accurate as of about 1980-ish through about the year 2000 approximately, give or take a little bit.
Love this.
This is a great picture.
Oh my God.
This comes from, it's vintageaerial.com. I don't know if that got put in the chat. I sent it to you privately.
I put it in there. It's in the chat.
This came from vintageaerial.com. You can view and get grainy, not so nice images of these. The real nice ones cost you money if you want to get the high quality resolution images. That's what this is. This was probably, I think in 1967, if I remember correctly. There's a few things that are, that's a year before I was born. There's a few things that were not there when I remember. But most of the things were there. What I thought was really neat about that, when you zoom in, you can see the rows of stuff in the garden.
This is amazing.
It's to the front of the house. You can see the clothesline pole. You can see that pot, that metal pot grandma, or that enamel pot grandma had a plant in all the time. When you zoom in, you can't see it now. And I can see, did I send you a zoomed in image of that? I can't remember.
I think you did.
Yeah, this is just the house. What I thought was really cool about this, the house is no longer standing, but I can see Grandpa's truck in the driveway, and I can see that pot she always had some plant in. And I just thought that when you zoom in, there's a lot of detail for an aerial picture taken from a moving plane. Well, when you think about that for a second, there was a lot of detail in that photograph.
Oh my gosh. Your photograph, I just have to go see the other one again because it was just so beautiful.
Yeah, this one is, you'll see on the website, but if you do a screenshot, we're not going to have the copyright law discussion right now, but you see them on their website, they're not this crisp and clean and zoom inable, because this is one I paid for to have a better digital copy of it.
So obviously you felt it was worth it because this is absolutely gorgeous. So it must not have been too steep.
It wasn't that steep, but it was my Christmas present to myself, if I remember right.
Oh, very nice way to parlay that into something that you feel comfortable doing. So I love those, and so your sketches are so cool. Like, I love them. I'm going to start doing more of those. So after you
notice we did them with pen and paper or pencil and paper. You can do computer ones, but you don't have to get fancy at the start. Just do something.
Yeah.
Just do something.
Yeah. And then you guys mentioned step 5, which is really a crucial aspect of this quick start, is to share with kin for comparison. So Michael, did you get a chance to do that with folks?
I have not done that yet. The only person I would share that with is my brother, because he's the only one. My dad is dead. My dad's brother is dead. We're the only two that have a lot of significant memories of that location. So probably he would comment on the scale, and that's not that big and that's not that small, but that's something you definitely want to do, because you're going to forget stuff and somebody else is going to remember.
Fantastic. Let's run through these steps one more time for outbuildings and outhouses, mapping the farm. Step 1, choose a rural family. Step 2, look for photos, sketches, or aerial photos. Step 3, interview relatives. Step 4, draw a sketch. And then step 5, share with kin for comparison. Thank you so much for that fun quick start, beautiful photos, and amazing hand-drawn maps. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, let me split the show. Hold on one second. Our special guest is coming. All right, it is time for our special guests with our special quick start, which is a first, Buffalo Soldiers. Please welcome the Vice President of the Delaware Augs chapter, Erwin Polk. Hello, Erwin.
Hello, how are you? And thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes, Erwin, and thanks for telling your peeps because they are here for you today. So, Erwin, I'd like to ask all of my special guests to tell us their 1-minute genealogy story. When did you get started on genealogy, and when did you know that you were hooked?
Probably could say I got started in genealogy in 1976 when the history of the Polk family book was put out by my aunt. She got information from one of her cousins, Condra Wilfred Williams, and combined that with names of people. But it didn't jump on me until 1993. My sister, Wanda, is a Delta affiliated with Valley Forge chapter, and they were putting up a monument at Valley Forge National Park to commemorate the blacks that fought in the American Revolution. And I ended up on the Today Show, and I had to know everything right quick, fast, and in a hurry. So that's what I did. And after that, it was like the Polk family information is good, but it isn't as strong as my maternal grandmother's family out of Ghoultown, New Jersey. And that book was written in 1913.
All right. Thanks for throwing in the Jersey.
Anytime.
Ghoultown, famous African-American enclave in New Jersey. But Erwin, let's go ahead and get started with your quick start.
Okay.
All right. So we are doing today, Erwin's here to do tracing Buffalo Soldier ancestors. We don't really need to have an introduction on what that is. We're going to jump right in because you're going to tell us all about it as we go through.
Okay.
So, Erwin, step 1 you have is to do general research. So, tell us about the ancestor who was like, about the ancestor who was a Buffalo Soldier who you did the general research for.
That would be my great-grandfather, Thomas Elsie Polk, Sr., born June 11th, 1860, died June 24th, 1940. He was born free.
Okay.
His father was freed in 1809 by means of a will, and his mother was born free because her parents and grandparents were both free. He lived in a little community village, which is now called Allen, Maryland, which at that particular time was Upper Trap, Maryland. And in 1880, on the census, he was listed. Yes, you can see I put dots beside his. He was listed as a sailor at the age of 20 years old. His mother, Rebecca, looks as though she was the head of the household at the time. I don't know where the father was. He was still alive. But he was a sailor in 1880. And then in 1882, he went to Baltimore and enlisted in the United States Army and was assigned to the 9th Cavalry, Company C, which took him out to Midwest.
Okay.
And actually Southwest, really, because he ended up in Oklahoma. And he ended up in several forts throughout the Midwest. He
And you
ended.
did you
Go ahead.
so you did your general research, you got the we're going to move on to step 2,
Okay.
which you said was to collect military records. So what was the start of, like, how did you even get started with collecting his military records?
First off, I have a family that helps all the time. They get involved. In 1996, we had a cemetery. We had a headstone put on his grave
Oh, yes.
at the cemetery. Neglected to send you a picture. No, I did send you that picture. Okay. And
This is a beautiful headstone, by the way. I created this slide, but I'm just now noticing the horse on it. It's absolutely gorgeous.
I think right in front of it, just out of the picture, is a little metal copper thing. It was only about, it wasn't even 12 by 12. And that was what we identified his grave with until that
Oh, wow.
headstone was put up in 1996. Family members reached out. Again, my sister Wanda reached out to, because this was done before Fold 3. So most of the stuff that I'm going to would be talking about should be on Fold 3 now. But at the time, she sent out to various government organizations, and only one of them sent it back, and she forgot which one, because I did talk to her about it this week. But she got a copy of his first enlistment paper, which was completed in March 2nd, 1882.
Okay. So I'm going to show how you you also got a pension card for him.
Yes.
Okay. So here's his pension card, and you said these are on Fold 3, right?
That should be on Fold 3 now. Actually, this one I pulled up this week. It was on Ancestry.
Oh, okay.
Just pull up Thomas Polk Sr., and it was on Ancestry. What it does is at the top it shows Polk, Thomas, Indian Wars. Then it drops down to service, enlisted 1882, discharged 1892, and Company C, 9th U.S. Cavalry. Then it was the date of the filing, which was August 28th, 1931. Class, even though I can read cursive.
Nah, no, you don't have to read all this. But this just alerts you to the fact that he got a pension at some point, right?
Yes.
And
in fact, he used that pension to buy himself a used car. My father told me that. Yeah, everybody in the family knows something. So everybody was just, as you just indicate to Mike and Jim, talk to family. I talked to family. My father said he bought a car with his pension. If you can go back to the enlistment paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that wouldn't have shown up in the records, right?
True. Let's see. At the top, it says United States of America. His name, what county he came from Maryland, which would have been Wicomico County.
Thank you for saying that, Wicomico.
Oh, yes.
And so what was with his enlistment papers, were there any things that came out of it that were, really interesting, or did it really, like, about family, or did it really just give about him?
Just about him as far as enlistment. But the important thing is he signed his name with an X. They have his name, which would be right in the middle of the page, Thomas Polk, and then there's an X, and someone initialed that it was his signature.
Okay.
And that was in 1882. If you have, okay, these are the papers that we got that told what he did. The paper in the middle which shows something about what he did and where he was. And when he came out, and the paper at the top, which identify he signed up in Baltimore, Maryland on the 2nd of March, 1882. And again, he signed with an X, Thomas Polk. And it gives information as to him coming out. What is it? One is a declaration of recruit. The one at the bottom is a consent in case of a minor, which he was not, because he was 22 when he went in. And the middle one is a description. Some of them would, you need a magnifying glass at all times.
I'm sorry I didn't blow this up really big.
No, I have it right here in my little book, but not going to go flipping through pages. But the idea is this all came in a package, and we got another document of the same papers,
yes,
but from 1887.
So what's that all about? I'm going to show that one. Yeah,
okay.
It's the same. Mm-hmm.
That one is extremely important because September 6, 1887, he re-enlisted. So he does 5 years, comes out, he went home, got married to a young lady in the community, Alice King. And according to a David Allen, who has deceased, he indicated to my sister that in order for him to re-enlist, he had to get permission from the Adjutant General's office.
Oh.
And obviously that went through. He enlisted. He and his wife went west because they had a child born in Leavenworth, Kansas. But on that document, he had no X above his name. He learned how to read and write while in the Army.
So Erwin, your cousin Tony Robinson from Maryland, she says, hello, Polk family from Maryland. And she wants to know, she had asked the question of why did he sign his name with an X?
He couldn't read and write. He was born in 1860. He was free, but he was not required to go to school. The schools in Eastern Shore, Maryland did not require till about the 1870s that kids go to school, and he was probably off working. Remember, he was also a sailor in 1880. Then in 1882, he's signing up to be in the Army, and he couldn't read and write. But he did earn the rank of sergeant. And based on David Allen's assumptions, and David Allen himself was a former World War II Buffalo soldier, he indicated you can't get promoted to sergeant unless you can read and write.
So Thomas was upwardly mobile.
Yes.
Very cool. Very cool.
And the ministers, there were 5 Black ministers who were assigned to teach. Well, they were religious leaders, but on Monday through Friday, they were teaching these soldiers how to read and write.
Very cool. So, Erwin, we're going to move on to step number 3, which is to join the national organization. So, that's wrong. Step number 3 is to locate books on the Buffalo Soldiers. So, is there a book that you can recommend for people who might be interested in learning about Buffalo Soldiers? Yes, put that closer.
On the Trail of the Buffalo Soldier. This is book number 2. There is a book number 1, which is holding up my Polk family history.
That looks pretty comprehensive, Erwin.
Yeah, it's also $175 brand new.
For just volume 1?
Volume 2 was $175. Volume 1 was $125.
Okay. But you're saying it's worth it?
For me.
Okay. They'll be back here soon.
The point is that I use it. I was able to, the author, what happened is the first book.
What's the name of the author, please?
Frank Schubert. He got his doctorate at Howard University. He was working at the Pentagon, and I had to call him and tell him in book number 1, he made some errors with regards to where Thomas Polk was stationed. And he said, Mr. Polk, I'm sorry. I didn't realize there were so many Thomas Polks in the 9th Cavalry within this 20-year time period. And the next time, when he was putting out book number 2, he had the publisher call me and ask for a picture of Thomas. They gave me permission to write a little blurb under Thomas's picture, and they put my name in as an acknowledgement towards the production of the book number 2.
Very nice. Could you hold that book up again, please? Cover your face, not that we don't want to see you. And
I
then
don't
push the book forward. Push it forward. There we go. Up too far. That's perfect. That's perfect. They wanted that. And heal your roots. Heal my roots. That's good, Erwin. Thank you. I hope that they got it. And so I just want to address a question about education and school requirements back in that time period. I cannot speak for the entire country, but I know in that early time period, there was very little desire to educate Black people. And it didn't matter where you were. And basically, I know in some areas here, the parents had to force the townships to build schools for them or make space for schools and pay for teachers. I know that happened here, and I'm sure it happened in other places. And so even if they finally did, it was segregated. So yes, that education was pretty tricky back then. And that was for like everybody, like everyone did not go to school, black or white. It wasn't, required, like Erwin said. So thank you. So that's a great book, Erwin. Let's move on to step 4, which I jumped the gun on, which is to join the national organization. So not only did your family join a national organization, you have a chapter, right?
Yes. My aunt and her uncle were the first. They organized the Thomas Elsie Polk chapter of the 9th and 10th Horse Cavalry Association of Buffalo Soldiers. And my father and mother were when the chapter was formed, my father and mother immediately signed up to be members. I signed up a year later. I guess they started in 1995. I know there are some cousins that can correct me on this. It started and it's been going on since probably, like I said, since 1995, and it was named after Thomas Elsie Polk Sr. And there is a chapter in Baltimore, which occasionally we draw information from them in terms of what should we do and to help us out, because we're still a small chapter in a rural area, and we're trying to reach out to everybody, and hopefully they can sit down and see something of this nature.
So what do you do in these Buffalo Soldier chapters? Are you like just researching all the time, or you reenactors, you dress up? Like, what do you do in a chapter?
All of the above. Most of the people who are in the chapter are members. There is a picture that I sent you
of
the Buffalo Soldier chapter. It's an old picture because half of the people in that picture are deceased already. My aunt, her husband.
I don't have that picture on the PowerPoint, but tell me about the pictures. The picture of the chapter.
In there, the current president, Althea Church Chandler, is there. She's dressed in a period outfit for a woman. She does a rendition on females. There was one female that snuck into the infantry in 1866, and her name was Kathy Williams. Well, she was able to disguise her body, pass whatever needed to be passed, and change her name from Kathy Williams to William Kathy.
What?
And she is the only woman that they have as absolutely, definitely being a Buffalo Soldier. And she didn't get a pension when she applied for it because she lied about her gender.
What? So she served
18 months.
Did she get kicked out?
She was discovered. There are several little ways of identifying it. One was she found out by the doctor, get sick on her own, or did she just get sick of being there and decided I'm going to be sick so I can get out of this?
Okay.
But it was what she did.
All
and
right.
For 18 months, she served as a man.
So your cousin reenacts her?
She reenacts her. She reenacts Thomas's mother, Alice King Polk. She does a lot of reenactings of that sort.
Okay.
And she's really, really good at it. You know, if you ever have somebody that you want to have just a show, she's the person to go to.
Hey, we might want her. I might have to have her, come here. It's too interesting. It's super interesting. I'm so spreading the word on that one. Let's move on to step 5, Erwin.
Okay.
And that is to share your story. So you have some unique ways in which you were able to share your story. Tell us about this article with your face in the middle there.
The Wilmington News Journal in July 1996. This was the news article prior to putting up the headstone at Thomas's gravesite. And that's a picture of Thomas. And they came to my home and interviewed me. And in there, I identified that he shot as a marksman, which I later found out that that's okay shooting, but it wasn't great. And he served 10 years. Each time he was discharged, his character was listed as either good or very good. And both times that of his enlistments, he earned the rank of sergeant.
Wow, 10 years. 10 years. That's a lot. And then I think there's another article.
Yes, there's the one I was thinking about.
Oh, okay.
At the bottom.
Oh, that's beautiful. So this is the organization all dressed up.
Those are the chapter members that are down in just outside in the Salisbury chapter. And it was taken by it was an interview by the Salisbury Daily Times, and that was on April 3rd, 2005. And there my aunt is holding the book I was holding, but showing Thomas's picture, which is the only picture of a Buffalo Soldier in that entire book. And you can barely see it, but underneath the picture there's writing, and that's what I put in to discuss who Thomas is and what he did. Yes, we always are talking. Family reunions. We are, in fact, I just got a notification today. We're having a family reunion out of the DC, Virginia, Baltimore area. Okay. We will be talking about this show and Thomas as a Buffalo Soldier and any other information we can find. Thomas himself had 2 families. His first wife he married in 1887 when he came home, and then after that he re-enlisted. She died in 1910 after they had 5 children. One of the children, a twin boy, Winfred Byfield Polk. He died in 1906. He was like 7 years old. Then he got married again to a Harriet Hattie Boone, who was from Baltimore. We are discussing her. Just last month, I was in Salisbury because they're opening a dedication to a trail. And that trail is called Hattie's Trail. And the house that replaced the house that Thomas built, because it burned down, is going to be turned into a welcome center for anyone there. And it will be dedicated to Buffalo soldiers.
And this is where specifically, like what
Okay, it's
county
on
and town?
Upper Ferry Road in Allen, Maryland, which is about 6-7 miles southwest of Salisbury, Maryland, just before you get to Princess Anne, Maryland, where University of Maryland Eastern Shore is located.
So, Erwin, I want to ask you one last question before I go through all these steps. Based off of all the stuff that you've learned so far on Buffalo Soldiers, is there anything that was very like unique that you didn't, that, you know, many people might not know about Buffalo Soldiers, or something interesting about Thomas?
That can't be answered today.
Okay. So let's run through the steps. Let's run through the steps and we'll come back.
I want to give you some answer.
Okay.
Probably the most interesting thing for me were the 5 chaplains of the Army. They were Black men. 4 of those 5 were born slaves. One of them, Theophilus Gould Stewart from Gouldtown, New Jersey. He was the only one that was not born a slave.
And these were the chaplains for this cavalry unit?
Yes. They taught this. They taught them how to read and write, plus took care of their religious. I read for Gould, Theophilus Stewart's chaplain report, which was a long, boring report. Every day he had to write something. He followed a lieutenant coming to the fort. He met with the lieutenant, talked to him. He married that lieutenant. The lieutenant had a child. He christened that child. Every single thing that needed to be done.
Where did you get this record from?
Gentleman David Allen sent it to my sister. He's now deceased. He had all the records for the Buffalo Soldiers and was able to extract where Thomas was each and every month.
So they're probably at the National Archives.
Let's hope so. This was in David Allen's home.
Yeah, but they're military records, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to, I can't say. I won't say because
okay.
I hope, but I don't know.
Okay. Can we go through the steps now?
Yes.
All right, let's go through the steps for tracing your Buffalo Soldier ancestors. Step 1, do some general research. It's all about genealogy. Step 2, collect the military records. Step 3, locate books on the Buffalo Soldiers. Step 4, join the national organization, maybe your local chapter, so you can get dressed up. Step 5 is then to share your story. So thank you so much for that, Erwin. Thank you for bringing your cousins. They are very excited. Let's bring Jim and Michael on just to wave bye. So thank you. And Erwin, it's been a pleasure to have you on here. Everyone just really enjoyed you. Michael and Jim, you blew them away again. So thank you. Let us find outro. Everyone, go find your people.